Good morning, everybody. The Simple Handicap for Tuesday, September 3rd. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. And whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Twitter, you're getting a podcast a whole bunch of different ways. Going to push it a little bit. Let's see. There was a big reaction to the videos that I posted yesterday, which are just a simulcast of me recording the podcast. People really liked it. People were sharing it. People were talking about it. So let's keep going with it. Let's see what happens. And we'll see how it goes. There's going to be a lot of reaction content as well posted on the YouTube channel after big games, after primetime games, my takeaways, my reactions to things that happen in games. So those will follow, but we'll do daily videos as well of the daily podcasts. And you just have a whole bunch of places to listen and consume the show. The main places forever and always will be Apple and Spotify on the podcast. But now we've got videos going around everywhere as well on Twitter and YouTube and elsewhere. So, hey, the more the merrier. It's good to have more folks listening to the show than ever, and I appreciate all the support you guys continue to give the daily podcast. Today is going to be a lot shorter than yesterday. I think yesterday will be the longest podcast in history of the show. It's beginning of the season. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. It was a good episode, but today let's get back into the usual format, which is every game, every team, every day. 10 to 15 minutes to get you on your way with everything you need to know about betting on the NFL. For us at Right Angle Sports, we have 3 releases so far this week. Potential for more to come. If you are interested in getting all of the plays and betting alongside with us, head over to raspicks.com/NFL for more details. Now options at a much lower price point for a single play, for 10 plays, for the rest of the season as well. A whole bunch of options available for anybody who wants to follow along. All right, here we go. Thursday night football. Just over 48 hours away. Here we go. Baltimore Ravens on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. This is still sitting as the Kansas City Chiefs a soft 3-point favorite. The consensus price we see across the board this morning is 3 even money. The total did see a little bit of movement on it yesterday. I don't agree with it, but some of the 46s and a halves now down to a flat 46. We saw that happen at Chris. We're seeing Pinnacle at 45 and a half, heavily shaded to the over. And remember, at Pinnacle, they're minus 111, but they deal 105 each side. So that looks a whole lot more like minus 116, which is headed back to the 46. But we're going to call this game a consensus 46 from left to right across the screen. Now, relative to open earlier in the year, we're down half a point. That is a little bit surprising to me to see this number come back in the other way, given how these teams are trending in the offseason. Mark Andrews is back at practice. There was never really an expectation he wouldn't play in this game, but now back at practice gives a little bit of confidence that we're definitely going to see him. And the number of different groups I'm in, I've heard nothing but praise and chatter for Isaiah Likely. His touchdown price, I'm sure you're going to hear a million times between now and kickoff 2. Also seen a lot of love for Xavier Worthy, specifically on his prop yards over. Neither opinion I real have on that, but that is something that I have seen pop up in a couple of different places. Getting to the Brazil game on Friday, it's the Green Bay Packers taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in Sao Paulo. This game has seen very little movement between yesterday and today. It is still sitting as the Eagles, a soft 3-point favorite. We are seeing the highest price on the board over at WPH 3 minus 105. We are seeing 3 even money at Chris, 2.5 still at Circa minus 120. Same thing for Pinnacle and Bet Online as well. Total in this game holding steady between 48.5 shaded towards 49 and flat 49s across the board. No real news in this game emerging as both teams heading towards Brazil now. Still looking at this game as probably one I would say is intriguing if you're looking at points. I'm just surprised to see there hasn't been more of an uptick in the over. I know the price is awfully inflated relative to market numbers, but I get the feeling between now and then we might see a little bit of over money come in if people can stomach taking on the inflated price. But that's certainly the way that I tend to be leaning a little bit in this one. Getting over to the Sunday card, it is the Jacksonville Jags on the road at the Miami Dolphins. 3 minus 15 or 3.5 even money, depending where you look, is the price on the Miami Dolphins. Total in this game is 49.5 across the board. We are seeing a couple 50s begin to emerge. Bet Online went to 50.5. That was a number that was lingering around 49.5, so we saw that point move up. Was talking yesterday on the stream how that was the direction that I was anticipating it was going. I think we're going to see that continue with the Jags' new scheme install on defense. Dolphins going through similar. I just think everything in this game points to people being intrigued by betting the over. When you're looking at players to lead their specific category, Tua to lead all quarterbacks in passing yards this week, against that new Jags defense, sitting around 8-1. That was the price I saw up at DraftKings yesterday for those of you who play those long shot props. Pittsburgh Steelers on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons still sitting as a consensus 3-point favorite across the board. Lots of minus 105 showing at Chris. Even money showing at Pinnacle. Minus 105 also at BetOnline. WPH up to minus 110. We're also seeing Buckeye at 3, minus 110 as well. We released the over on this game earlier in the week at 41. The total is currently sitting at 42, with a couple 42.5 showing at the offshore books. Got news yesterday that Jaylen Warren is trending in the right direction and should be good to go for week 1 as he was dealing with that injury. It's going to impact the props out of the backfield for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but also give that offense another weapon that they need on the field. Minnesota on the road at the New York Giants, a game that was omitted from the Marathon Monday podcast. You can blame me for that one. Skipped over it. The YouTube nerves being recorded on video got to me a little bit in that one, so I just jumped right over it. I'll spend a little bit of time here. There was a release from a professional bettor that we compete with on the Minnesota Vikings a couple of weeks ago. Went very early on it, had a strong opinion on the Vikings. That was sitting at anywhere from Minnesota +1 to +1.5. Since he released that game, we've seen this number flip, went through the 0. It is now Vikings minus 1.5 at Chris. We're also seeing minus 1.5 at WPH. We're seeing that at BetOnline, FanDuel, as well as Buckeye too. So all the books that really stand out, showing the Minnesota Vikings as bigger favorites than more of the recreational focused books, which are slightly lower. We're looking at this total. 41.5 is now 41, shaded to the over. I think Minnesota's offense is being discredited a little bit relative to market when you think about how much they were downgraded. They were anywhere from a 3 to 4 point per game dip on their point spread when you're looking at look-ahead lines this year versus last year. I think what Kevin O'Connell showed with backup quarterbacks in place last year, he went through 3 of them after Kirk Cousins and still maintain a level of competency on offense, and EPA was ranking anywhere between 17th and 20th, depending on the time span you look at. And that was without Justin Jefferson, too, remember. So I think Sam Darnold, with the offseason prep, is going to step into this offense, and this is not going to be a unit that is anywhere near the bottom of the league. I think they're going to contend to be average on offense because Kevin O'Connell is that good of a play caller. Matched up against the New York Giants, you have a Giants team that is elite up front on the defensive line. So if O'Connell can give plays to Sam Darnold that keep him in rhythm and don't allow him to hold on to the ball for a long time where he loses all accuracy that he has, and that's not putting it lightly because he's a very inaccurate quarterback, he just cannot play out of structure. If they keep him in structure and get the ball out of his hands quickly, this secondary for the Giants is going to get chewed up and works out pretty well for Minnesota. So that's a pretty positive matchup. On the other side, if you're looking at this game from a total perspective and thinking of the over, might be a bit of a deer in a headlight scenario as you're looking at Daniel Jones. I'm going to put a caveat on what you saw in preseason. There was the bad interception. And by God, everybody on Twitter loves to pile on Daniel Jones. It's the popular thing to do. Everybody loves to take shots at the guy. I'm not, again, as I've said a couple times, rushing to the defense of Daniel Jones. I'm not making a case that he is a great quarterback in the NFL. That's not where this is going. But it's hard to take that game in the preseason in Houston in context because any quarterback that goes into Houston this year is going to look similar to Daniel Jones. This is a terrifying Texans defense, especially at home. That was a preseason spot that was just brutal for Jones. So pump the brakes on that a little bit. The thing that stood out to me were reporters covering the team and the game saying how the Giants' offensive line actually impressed them. So we're waiting to see with a couple of injuries, Michael Schmitz. We're also waiting to see what's going on the right side of the offensive line, too. We'll get more news on that tomorrow with the first initial injury report. You're going to need the O-line to hold up against the Brian Flores pass rush. But I don't know if the Giants' offense is going to start the year as bad as people are making it out to be. That's just the sense that I have. And again, when I'm saying that it's relative to expectation, the expectation for the Giants' offense is near the bottom of the league. But you still have Hyatt and now Neighbors in this offense. If Jones has time, there are going to be big plays to be had against this Vikings defense as they bring in you guys and try to sort things out and figure out exactly what they want to do in the secondary behind the defensive front that just blitzes at the highest rate in the NFL. So I wouldn't be throwing every opportunity for offense out of the window in this game, and I certainly wouldn't be discounting both of these quarterbacks in this game. Now, Still a lot to be seen about what this looks like long term. But coming into this one game set, especially with Dayball potentially taking over plays, not officially announced yet, a lot of emphasis on both of these offenses to get right early in the season. It's the Carolina Panthers on the road at the New Orleans Saints. The 4.5s are gone. The Rogue 5 that was at Chris was gone. Kind of hinted at that being a little bit high as it was looking. And now we're back to a flat 4 across the board. So this is a game that's been between 3.5 and 5. When you see positions like this taken on both sides, and even if you are looking at the first initial position on the Panthers, which got the number down to 3.5 as a fake, we now kind of have bumpers, if you will, on both sides of this market at 3.5 and at 5. We're kind of locked into this window. Anything now that's going to be a stance taken is going to have to come with a lot of influence and move it back. And to me, looking at this number without any news being anticipated now that Shaheed is ruled in and he is going to be good to go for the Saints, it's going to take something pretty substantial, I think, to drive that. So if an opinion comes into the market, I would expect it's more likely to be on the Panthers than it is to be on the Saints at this point. But that's just kind of how I'm looking at this. We had a release on this game over at 40.5. It is now 41.5 across the board for the total. New England on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. That is Cincinnati minus 8.5 from left to right across the screen with a total as low as 40, showing at many spots on the board this morning. We're seeing 40.5 though at Chris. We're seeing the same at Circa and Pinnacle as well. We released under 42 earlier last week on this game, driving that total down. That is what drove the under down on the board from left to right across the screen. When I'm looking at this game now from the side, the move on Cincinnati that brought the number down, or drove the Pats down rather, from 9.5 now down to 8.5, to me was much more correlated with the total being moved down than it was anything else. And now we have this secondary story coming in after that move with Jamar Chase, whose status is very much in doubt. And I saw both sides yesterday in the news. I saw one report saying it's very close and the deal is imminent. I saw another one saying that he's day-to-day, and even if he does sign, it's going to be tough for him to be out there on Sunday with so little practice leading up to this scenario. And so I think today is going to be a massive day. If he doesn't get a deal resolved today and you get into regular practice routines beginning on Wednesday and he's not there, to me that becomes a tough scenario to where he's signed and then put in the game on Sunday. No insight, nor real speculative confidence on my part about what is going to happen. Boy, it sure would be a big blow to Cincinnati if they can't sort things out. It just makes no sense for them not to get something right for Chase, who is such an impactful part to this team. But let's see how this story plays out today. Will certainly have an impact on this point spread and this total as well. Tennessee Titans on the road at the Chicago Bears. It is still Chicago, a 4.5-point favorite across the screen. Total in this game is as high as 45.5. We're seeing 45 shaded over at Chris. We're seeing the same thing at WPH and BetOnline as well. There was a release from another professional bettor on the over in this game at 43.5 last week. That drove the total up a 2 full point move, and I think we could maybe see this tick up a little bit higher. Some interesting weekly leader prop numbers showed up for this one. Will Levis to lead all quarterbacks in passing yards for this week, specifically on Sunday. Does not include Thursday night, Friday night, nor Monday night football, so it's just the 13 Sunday games. He is listed at 28-1. I also saw some people bet the Tennessee Titans to be the highest scoring team of all games on Sunday, and that was available at 45-1. So some big props there on the Titans offensive switch. We saw some big games with Jake Browning as a backup in the Brian Callahan offense at the latter portion of last season. So there's optimism with that scheme change. And the thought is that potentially the market's just a little bit slow to react to that, especially when it's dictated by a total that's a little bit lower. But we've already seen a lot of pro money on this over. The one thing that I would throw, it's kind of a caveat into that, is we look at weather in this game. This is one of the higher wind games of the week. It's not past that 20-mile-per-hour mark where it comes detrimental, but we are forecasting sustained winds right around 15 miles per hour. The key weather report, as always, comes on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time from Kevin Roth. That dictates the entire market. We see things line up. Don't think we're going to see any red games. Might get a few orange flags for wind and potentially rain in Tampa Bay. But other than that, the weather on the board is looking pretty clean. So that would be the only hesitance that I would have if you're intrigued by some of these Titans props when you're looking at this game on the road in Chicago. But certainly two teams where their offenses are going to look a lot different and two teams poised to score plenty of points in that matchup. Arizona Cardinals on the road at the Buffalo Bills. It is still Buffalo, a 6-point favorite across the board. Total in this game, 48.5 across the board. Very little to talk about this game in terms of changes from yesterday into today. Houston on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. It is still Houston, a 2.5-point favorite across the board. Total in this game, 48.5, shaded towards the over. Just a little bit of Colts money into the market since yesterday. That kind of is something that I would agree with, seeing this number move towards Indy. I just thought the Texans' price, just a big move and a big adjustment for them and how they're going to have struggles defending the Colts' ground game. And so that still holds true. No real news pending or lingering on this game at the moment. Las Vegas on the road at the LA Chargers. It is the Chargers now down to a flat 3-point favorite at Circa. We're seeing 3 minus 102 at Pinnacle. When we're looking at that Pinnacle price specifically for the Chargers, that is the lowest number that we have seen since this market opened. So there is Raiders money coming into the market as these numbers get driven down. Chargers news yesterday, Joey Bosa back at practice, and he was doing so without a club on his hand. He fractured a bone in his hand back in the early part of August. There was a 4 to 6 week recovery timeline. Didn't keep him out of practice nor participation at a full 100% basis, but he was dealing with a club and cast on his hand. That is now off, and he's practicing back at his full rate. So he should be fully good to go for the game on Sunday, and that's going to be pretty impactful against Gardner Minshew in the pocket. Washington on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers holding steady as a 3.5-point favorite. That money on Washington last week took out all of the 4s, as we talked about yesterday, drove this number down to 3.5. Once it got to 3, though, we saw this number come back towards the 3.5. So another game where we have two pretty clear buy points. 4 and up, there's money on Washington. When you get to that flat 3, there's money coming back on Tampa Bay. The total is up now from 41.5 all the way to 44. Another group released the over on this game earlier last week. Again, this is the one game that might have a weather flag once we get the Roth report tomorrow, just because there is 65% chance of rain. That's just a Florida gamble that you're dealing with for September football when you're trying to handicap weather. Tough thing to project, tough thing to predict, but that might keep the ceiling kind of a little bit lower on this total as we get closer to Sunday. If it clears up, you're looking at how bad the secondary is for Washington. There is absolutely potential for Baker Mayfield and these wide receivers to have a good advantage, because this is a Commanders defense that enters the year as the worst graded unit in football in the secondary, and it's a new defense that needs to get things right in just a tough spot. So I agree with that over move last week. And then again, you're talking about those weekly leader props, which I think we'll weave in a little bit more on the podcast than typical seasons past. And you're looking at Baker Mayfield to lead all quarterbacks in passing yards. You're going to have to dodge Tua in that conversation, but I think there's potential for Mayfield to have a big game. He's listed at 17-1, which I think is an interesting bet. But again, you're gambling with some weather and rain potential in this one. Denver on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. As expected, the 5.5s are gone. This is now 6, and it's shaded a little bit higher as we see Seattle money come into the market. Total holding steady at 42 across the board. There was some intrigue yesterday, I think, for Seattle because Tyler Lockett was interviewed. He said that he is good to go and he's feeling good. His status was never really in doubt, but there was potential uncertainty lingering as he was in and out of practice last week. But he says he's good to go. You get those trio of wide receivers for Seattle against this Denver secondary, which outside Surtain just doesn't have anybody back there. And I think their grades are a little bit inflated as low as they are. Certainly a ton of potential for Geno and company to move the football. And if these reports about Bo Nix not so much getting along and being on the same page with some of these offensive concepts and perhaps a little bit of rumbling inside the locker room start to emerge, and we see that, some reports coming out of The Athletic and elsewhere that there's kind of hints of what's going on there. Certainly wouldn't be new for a Peyton offense to have some disconnect between he and players. I'm not fully buying into it yet. It seems to be more of a Knicks player thing than it is anything else. Again, nothing that I have like substantial, concrete, quotes or anything about, but that's the way that things tend to be kind of leaning by the sounds of it. I don't know what to make of it. What I do know is this is just a brutal spot for a rookie to make his debut in the league against this Seahawks defense led by Mike Macdonald. I think that's a tough spot, but we are getting to the point now at 6 and higher where this is getting in to be a pretty big number. Dallas on the road at the Cleveland Browns. No more 2s on the board for Cleveland. This is all 2.5 shaded towards the 3. We haven't seen a 3 yet in the last little bit. This was a number that opened all the way down at 1, and it's been leaking towards Cleveland since. Initially, there were a couple places that opened pick way back. That was 7-8 weeks ago, but we've seen all of those now move. So we're 2.5 headed towards the 3. I still stand on the fact that if we see a 3 show on the board, there's going to be people running to back the Cowboys and take that right away. So I think this is a side that's kind of held in place. And if we do see a 3, I definitely think Cowboys money will show in the market. LA Rams on the road at the Detroit Lions. Sunday Night Football. This is Detroit, a 3.5-point favorite across the board. But these 3.5s are getting softer and softer by the day. We're seeing plus 102 at Pinnacle, minus 105 at Circa, minus 105 at Chris, WPH, FanDuel, Buckeye showing that as well. There's numbers getting a little bit softer. It gets down to 3. We will see bets come in on the Detroit Lions, so I think that is now just kind of holding this number hostage a little bit between 3 and 4, as there was some intrigue on the Rams once those numbers got a little bit higher. But if this drops down, we're absolutely going to see Lions money come into the market. And then it is Monday Night Football with the Jets on the road at the 49ers. Total continues to come down, 43.5, now 42.5, and shaded slightly lower at Pinnacle, minus 106 as under money, as expected, comes in yesterday with this Jets defensive front, matched up against the 49ers offensive line, and now Pearsall confirmed to be on the 4-week PUP list for the 49ers, so they will be without their rookie wide receiver on the field. They will have Brandon Ayuk, but still you take away even more weapons from this Niners team. That becomes concerning, and there's still everybody being held on Trent Williams' watch. What are we going to get from him? If there's doubts that Jamar Chase, if signs, is going to start for the Bengals, I think Williams would certainly be in that same category, but it sounds like things are a lot further away for Williams and the Niners than they are Chase and the Bengals. So if he is officially ruled out, I still think, as I said yesterday, we have room for this total to come in a little bit. And I do think we'll see the Jets take perhaps a little bit more money, but there's going to be at some point, I think, as these 3.5s get softer, money come in on the 49ers and this push back towards San Francisco minus 4. That'll do it for me today. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody. Reminder that the full preview live stream is back on YouTube tomorrow, Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. But of course, there will be podcast uploads each and every day here on the podcast feed, as well as YouTube, and now on Twitter too on video. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody. We'll chat to you tomorrow.